once again, I'm here to talk about the very essence of reconciliation, which is giving our kids back. We need to have decision-making power and the financial resources to be able to care for our kids in the way we choose to care for our kids, which is primarily through customary and kinship care arrangements.
I rule the amendment inadmissible. Ms. Kazan?
Well,
Ms. Kazan, there's no debate. You can challenge my ruling.
So it's time to give our kids back, so I'm going to challenge your ruling.
Does the committee support the chair's ruling or not?
Yes.
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 Yes. So I'm personally not going to support this, mainly based on the fact that I don't think it does justice to the Indigenous community. I respect the member opposite who's made the amendment. I think that's the right thing to do. But I don't have confidence in just last minute putting this in without really going out there and listening to the community. They've been completely ignored in this bill if they're not included in it. I think it's insulting to the community, to be honest.
Here's the thing. There's been lots of research, documentation, publications by Indigenous child welfare agencies supporting the need for kinship and customary care. What's missing is that often family members or kinship and community have to take on this responsibility with zero income. When you talk about disrespect, I'll tell you what's disrespectful to Indigenous communities. From my perspective, only speaking as one Indigenous person, we have to consult about stupid stuff like, do we want toilets? How do we feel about clean drinking water in our community? You ask one First Nations community who doesn't want to have control over matters that impact their kids in a way that is consistent with our customs and traditions, you find me one. This is at the very foundational level of the TRC.
Abstain.
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 I want to commend other parties in the House that understood the importance of ensuring that Bill C-15 was compatible with the child care legislation, which is why I put forward this amendment, which is what we're supposed to do in committee, is that people put forward legislation, even in parties not of my own, and my job as a legislator is to put forward amendments to strengthen legislation. We cannot risk children having to be taken away from family and community for issues of poverty, which sometimes result in kids going into care, not lack of parenting, but issues of poverty. So the consultation piece, not doing Indigenous people justice, doesn't fly.
The principle of nothing without us is absolutely paramount. And on an issue as important as this one, we believe that it is absolutely imperative that we hear from Indigenous partners.
Clearly, there has been lots of consultation on child welfare. You just have to look at the work of Cindy Blackstock. Kinship and customary care is kind of top priority. I find it very patronizing to Indigenous peoples that they think we're so stupid that we have to consult about things that we have been talking about for years publicly. If you look at any First Nations child welfare agency, if it's now just an issue because I'm bringing it up, maybe it's not, the onus isn't on us. Maybe if people really cared, they'd actually read when they're spending money on reconciliation, what's being said. Like, our kids are dying. So, like, if we're going to make excuses about why we are not supporting the human rights of Indigenous families to have the economic resources so that they have food on the table, then let's just be honest here about where this country's at with reconciliation. But I don't want to hear about nothing about us without us, because I have a whole list of items that are happening without us.
Shall the bill as amended carry? Yes. So the committee has agreed and has adopted several amendments.
Mr. Speaker, the legacy of Canadian policies designed to kill the Indian in the child still impacts our families. There are more Indigenous kids in child welfare today than at the height of residential schools. In Manitoba, over 90% are Indigenous. That is why I was proud, along with my colleague from Port Moody, Coquitlam, and the NDP, to amend Bill C-318 to provide EI benefits for kinship and customary care. I was concerned that the Liberal members abstained from voting, but not surprised considering they voted against our amendment to affirm the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous parents in the national child care legislation. If this current government is not ready to give our kids back, then their words of reconciliation are empty.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you. Madam Speaker, I'm rising on a point of order respecting the committee's consideration of Bill C-318. Since these amendments were deemed inadmissible by the chair of the committee on the grounds that they exceeded the scope of the bill and give rise to the need for a royal recommendation, I therefore submit that these amendments be struck from the bill and a new version of the bill without the offending amendments be reprinted. Thank you for your patience, Madam Speaker.
Point of order. I recognize the honourable member from Winnipeg Centre.
My colleague from Winnipeg North mentioned the committee process where I tabled crucial amendments to this legislation that would bring the bill into compliance with Canadian law. Let me remind the government through you, Mr. Speaker, that they are the government that passed Bill C-15, which affirmed that all legislation going forward has to be compatible with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Not including these important amendments means that this legislation now is not compliant with Articles 19, 21, and 22 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. The MP for Winnipeg North talked about the amendments being out of scope, but even the sponsor of the bill said that those amendments were absolutely in scope with what C-318 is trying to do. What my colleague failed to mention is that the Liberal government has the power to allow the amendments to proceed by giving notice of a royal recommendation for C-318. They are the ones that have the power to do that. The only ones that can act right now are the Liberals. And on their watch, Mr. Speaker, by not upholding Canadian law, which includes Bill C-15, it's only the Liberals that can save the lives of Indigenous children that are being dropped off at shelters, being separated from their families and community. I'm asking them to table a royal recommendation to do the right thing to make sure Bill C-318 can go to a vote at third reading with the amendments adopted by committee. Lives are on their hands. This is a life and death matter. They have to stop playing with Indigenous lives and do what is needed now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.